to the world of international marketing.
Is this the first day of class? I'm confused.
I understand completely. We're going to talk today about dealing with some of the cultural challenges as global marketers, and then we're going to review the quiz regarding pricing. So let's begin. We're going to talk about chapter 19 now and talk about what is culture. What are some of the components of culture? Because certainly one of our big challenges in being successful as global marketers is in dealing with cultural challenges, whether it's the culture of the customers that we want to sell to, or the culture of the employees, or the culture of the organizations that we're partnering with. What is culture? What are some of the components of culture? Because very often we use that term in a very broad way, but there's some key components of culture that we need to address.
So like an important factor may be history or tastes and preferences.
So absolutely. So the history of a people is an important part of their culture. What are some of the triumphs of the people, and also what are some of the setbacks? Who are some of their heroes, and also who are some of their villains? From a marketing standpoint, why would we care about that? Why is that significant to say, this individual is a hero in this culture? Why would that be relevant to us as marketers if we want to sell in that particular market? How could that help us?
I mean, if they look at that specific person or character as a hero, then you can, maybe you could somehow, get him on your packaging, or somehow incorporate that into your product or service, where people will have a when they think of you, they'll think of the hero. They'll have a good what's the word? Like they'll classify you in their mind or whatever.
Yeah, they'll have a positive attitude towards our brand.
Right.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is correct, that if we identify certain heroes in that particular culture, then that's something that we want to leverage. And like Ezra was saying, well, maybe we could even have a vignette on our packaging, for example, that's talking about the accomplishments of that individual. Whether the individual is a hero in terms of political achievement or in the healthcare field. What we want to do is, remember we said we want to create strong, unique, and favorable associations with our brand. So like Ezra is saying is, well, if we know that this person is very highly regarded in that culture, then we want to connect that person with our brand, whether they're alive or no longer alive. So just even telling the history of a particular culture on your packaging and talking about somebody that's very highly regarded, somebody who's respected in that particular culture, can have a positive impact on our brand. And if the person is still alive, maybe we could get them as a
Spokesperson?
Yeah, as a spokesperson. So have them endorse our product. Who could think of an example of somebody that in some cultures is considered to be a hero or celebrity that we might, depending on our business, we might want to use to promote our product?
I was going to say, recently I think it was the YU Chemistry Club, they hosted Kobayashi, he's like a professional eater. So he was talking about how, like, in Japan, even in America, he's very popular, and he's had deals with different I think maybe Nike or different sporting goods companies or something like that, where they found a guy who was very popular among the people, and he
So in Japan,
in Japan and also a little bit in America as well, like maybe in Japanese, neighborhoods.
good. So that's a good example. Go ahead.
You can use Jeremy Lin for all of just Asia in general.
Right, Jeremy Lin from the Knicks, definitely. There's some Linsanity going on there, and not just in the United States, but certainly around the world. He's Asian, and so he's certainly very highly regarded in China, for example. Any other examples? What do you think? Around the world, think about whether it's in Europe.
Korean pop star Rain, very popular in Korea, not as much here.
Yeah, so, and when we think about whether or not we're going to use Fei Wong in China or Rain, we have to remember that our advertising, for example, is something that we're going to have to customize by market. So, again, remember we said that we have to tailor our advertising, we have to tailor the messaging, but also the execution of the advertising and the talent. So, for example, in a particular commercial or a print ad, that's something that we have to choose very carefully. Is it going to be Fei Wong? Is it going to be Barack Obama? Is it going to be Jeremy Lin? Who is it going to be that can resonate with our target audience? That our target audience is going to be able to connect with and ultimately enhance our ability to sell our product in that particular market. What else? What are some other aspects of culture besides the history of a particular market? Go ahead.
The mentality of the nation.
And so tell us, in what way?
Meaning each and every nation has their own mentality, like the stereotypes we connect to the nations also. I don't know, for example, we know like the Germans are always on time. So it's like this like represents for example a nation.
So we need to understand stereotypes in a particular market and how those stereotypes are viewed. And are they really just stereotypes, or are they...
Realities.
Yeah, is it a reality? And how is it viewed? Is it something that's viewed favorably, or is it something that's viewed unfavorably by the people in that particular market? So some stereotypes could be positive, like you're saying, okay, people are on time. That's not a bad thing. If it was all people, in this particular culture are drunks, well then, that's obviously unfavorable. So we need to understand that, though. We need to understand what are the stereotypes in a particular market and how that relates to the culture, how that impacts the culture. Because remember, we have a certain self-image, a certain self-perception. And then there's the way others perceive us. One of the challenges, for example, in Harlem, for example, which is a mecca for African American culture. So people come from all around the world to get a feel for what African American culture is like. But some of the residents there feel that it's not an accurate depiction of African Americans. Because, for example, there's billboards, huge billboards of individuals with thick gold chains that are like 36 inches long with big gold medallions and gold teeth and pants hanging down below their waist. So the question is that really an accurate depiction of African American culture? And so a lot of people feel that it's not. And just ask Colin Powell, for example, former Secretary of State for the United States of America, former Joint Chiefs of Staff. If you ask him, does he think that that's representative of black culture in the United States? He would say no. Ask Condoleezza Rice. Do you think she thinks that's representative of black culture in the United States? Obviously, the answer is no. And the other thing is that it has an impact on the residents too, because young people growing up see that. And that's what's portrayed to them as success. Well, why not have a billboard there of Colin Powell and says, "Hi, my name is Colin Powell. I'm a Jamaican American, former Joint Chief of Staff and Secretary of State." Is that, do you think, maybe a more positive role model for young black men living in Harlem? And so a lot of people feel that it would be. Not that I'm not making any judgments about wearing jewelry or anything like that, or your pants hanging off your tuchus. You know, they even have a song, right? Pants on the floor, pants on the floor.
Hands to your left.
So, so the point is that how is that a part of a given culture, and how does what we perceive to be our culture and what other people view as our culture? So as international marketers, we need to understand that. Because we need to be able to connect. We need to be able to develop advertising that's going to be able to resonate with our target audience. So culture is so important. Obviously, I think that's a good example of how culture is communicated in a given market, and also how others can view a particular culture. So we look for evidence. We say there's a market that has a certain culture, so then we look around and we say, well, what is the evidence? What evidence do we see that a culture exists here? And so we're looking for things like norms. What are the norms? What are the customs? What are the traditions? All of those things are part of culture. Religion is a big part of culture. How is that going to help us? So you say, okay, I understand. Not everybody is Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Buddhist. How are we going to use that as global marketers? So we decide that we're going to sell our product in a particular market, and so our challenge is, well, how do we do that effectively? And so what I'm suggesting is, well, one of the ways that we're going to be successful in global marketing is we need to understand the culture. We need to understand the history, the norms, traditions, customs, religion. How is it going to be helpful? So we do a market analysis and we determine the demographics of that particular market. We know what percentage of the market is a given religion. What do we do with that information? Why do we care? So beyond interesting, you might look at the numbers and say, oh, this is interesting. But then beyond interesting, because I always say we need to have information that's actionable. Because we need to make fact-based decisions. So what do we do with that? What do we do with the information when we find out that 35% of the market is Christian, 10% of the market is Jewish, 40% of the market is Muslim, for example, and then what are we left with, 15%? So if we have that information, how is that going to help us? Go ahead, Daniel.
It'll help us to target, segment the market, as well as give us an idea of what proper ways to use to reach the different segments and markets.
And so tell us more about that. So once we identify, so we could say, well, these are given segments. And when we talk about the percentages, 35%, for example, that's an example of market sizing. So we identify these different religious segments in that market. And then what we need to do is quantify the markets. So it can give us some insight into what segments we may want to target. What segments in what order, what priority. So remember we talked about segmentation, we said one of the things that's significant is the size of the market. The size of the market, the growth rate, whether the segment is reachable. So tell us a little bit more about that, Daniel. So once we have this information, we've identified, we segmented the market by religion, which we said is an important part of culture, and we quantified the markets. Then how do we execute against that? Once we know that, and we're developing products, and we're working on our advertising campaigns, and our other marketing communication program elements, what do we do with that information? Give us, maybe you could give us an example, or anybody, give us an example of what we would do with that information. How do we bring that to life?
So at that point, you kind of manipulate the different things that you're able to control in the situation, such as the type of promotion, or the price, or the geographic segmentation, distribution, stuff like that. And then you kind of move those variables around to best appeal to each target segment. And obviously you're going to pick which target segments make up a larger portion of your user group and focus on those more than the others, probably.
And so, for example, if we know that the market has a significant number of Muslims there, then we're going to customize our marketing communications to be able to connect with the Muslim population in that particular market. And so how would we do that? Well, one of the things we could do is focus some elements of our campaign on Muslim holidays, for example. So we might have a campaign around the time of Eid and wish our Muslim customers Eid Mubarak. What about if we're a company that sells greeting cards? Wouldn't that be significant to understand that we need to have some greeting cards that are for Christmas, some that are for Hanukkah, some that are for a variety of different holidays? Maybe some markets are a niche, maybe some markets are just too small for us to have a line of greeting cards for that particular religious group. But if that's our business, for example, to sell greeting cards, then we need to have greeting cards for a variety of different holidays based on the demographics of that particular market. So based on what percentage of the market is associated with a particular religion. about ethics? What about the ethical behavior of us as marketers around the world? Just go ahead.
Well, I mean, we have to be sensitive to those. You know, there are different. You know, within different markets, different countries. You know, different people have different types of ethics. You know, certain places, certain things are okay. Other places, you know, things are not. So you have to tailor. You know, first of all, you know, your marketing mix, your 4 Ps, to you know whoever you're dealing with, and it should be, you know, take into consideration, you know, their ethics. So if I don't know if you know, for them it's not ethical to greet people without shaking hands or something. I don't know, something along those. Maybe that'd be more social norms, but whatever. If there's something that were unethical to them that you know you deem ethical, you have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So importantly, sometimes people say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Well, not so quick.
Well, you saw
Okay.
what happened with Apple was that they did as the Romans did, and then, you know, they got backlash in America, even though, like, you know, ethically what they were doing in China was considered okay.
Absolutely. So tell us more. Go ahead.
Basically, it's kind of like different. It's not only that you have to focus on the ethics of the country that you're in, but
Well, tell us about Apple. Tell us about their situation, because I think that's a good
The
example.
working conditions were so poor in their manufacturing facilities that there was at least 2 suicides a week of the workers. They were just like killing themselves because they were so miserable. So basically, even though, like, you know, the sweatshop work in China, that's almost like, it's not like an accepted thing, but you know, it wouldn't be as big of an outcry ethically there as it is here, because of the level of communication and the internet, and you know, one country being able to easily have access to another's media and, you know, the internet and everything like that. As a result, you know, ethics has to take on like a global perspective as well as just a local as well.
Absolutely. So in a given market, now this is important, as you travel, as a global marketer, as a business person, you need to make sure that you adhere to the local laws. If it's illegal in that particular market, that means what? That means that you can't do that. And the last thing that you want to tell them is, I'm an American citizen. Oh, that's going to go over well.
Nope.
You can't break the law in a particular market outside of the United States. You have to follow the laws of that particular market, of that particular country. But it's even more challenging for us as global marketers. Why? Because the 1976 Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, passed by Congress, said that if it's against American law, then it doesn't matter if your organization is operating outside of the US, you still have to make sure that your company is not in violation of American laws. So, for example, Ezra and Daniel were suggesting that in some cases, in some markets, there's things that are considered to be acceptable. But what Congress has said, we don't care. We understand in that market it's considered acceptable to give bribes. Congress says, no, bribes are illegal. And if you're operating in whatever country it is, whether it's China or some other market, that it's illegal, even though it may be a part of that culture, it may be considered to be acceptable, you shouldn't do it. And then, of course, students always ask, well, how will the government know? I love that. The wheels are always turning, right? But maybe I could still get away with it, right? Isn't that what we see? Isn't that the foundation of unethical behavior? is that why do people do things that are unethical or illegal? Because they think they're going to get caught, right? That's why they do it. Reuben, why would you do it? Why would you do something that was unethical or illegal? The only reason why you would do it is because you knew for sure that you were going to get caught, right? No, people think, executives believe they're going to get away with it. Nobody's going to know. And in some cases, that might be the case. But integrity is about doing what's right, even if nobody is looking. So when you go downstairs to Nagel Bagel, and the guy is not at the counter, so you know what I do? You see, the reason I walk with this big briefcase, because I go down there, I wait. When the guy is not there, then I stuff my bag with Milky Way and Danishes and things, right? Because who's going to see? No, so I wait for the guy to come. He's a nice guy. Then he comes. He says, how many candy bars do you have in your briefcase? I tell him 18, so he charges me for 18. It's a joke, guys. Calm down. It's a joke, right? So, but you see what I'm saying is that integrity means doing what's right even if nobody is looking. So it doesn't mean if the guy is at the counter or not, it shouldn't impact our behavior. We know what's right and wrong. We're supposed to pay for the merchandise. If the guy is not at the counter, it doesn't matter. We're still responsible for doing what's right. U.S. companies have put a lot of pressure on suppliers outside of the U.S. to adhere to American labor laws. So what Daniel is saying is absolutely a problem. And American companies have set up standards and they have supplier guidelines where they indicate what they expect from their suppliers. That the workers have got to be a certain minimum age and they can't work more than a certain number of hours. So, regardless of the fact that it's acceptable in that culture, sometimes as global marketers, we have an ability to impact that culture. Sometimes in a positive way. And sometimes we're impacted as global marketers by that culture. And it's going to dictate how we do business. It's going to dictate the content of our marketing communications. It's going to dictate who we use as a spokesperson. It's going to dictate the tactics that we use, the features and benefits of our product, our unique selling proposition, our brand promise. Of course, we have to customize all those things based on the market in which we want to sell. That's the recipe for success. One size does not fit all. You ever see these products? One size fits all. So in the winter, I went into the Armani shop on 5th Avenue, and I saw a hat. I see, Ezra, see, I'm in the market for hats.
What kind of hat?
A nice hat.
What does that mean, a nice hat?
I'm gonna tell you. I saw one that I liked. I want to get Ezra's hat. You saw his hat?
No.
Yes, it's nice. It's very nice.
Small fedora.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Classic.
So I went in there. It's cold, and so obviously, in my situation, you know, you want to keep your head covered, right? So if you don't have hair, then you're going to look for some other method of keeping your head warm. And so I went in there, and I saw a hat that I liked, and I tried to put it on. I said, well, let me see if it fits, right? That's not unreasonable. I said, let me try it on and see if it fits. So I pulled it to the left, and I pulled it to the right, I pulled it front, I pulled it back. Hey, you know something? This is, who am I kidding? This hat does not fit.
And it said one size fits all?
So I turned the hat inside out to see maybe this one is a small, so I probably need a medium or a large. So I turned the hat inside out, and like Graf said, there it said, one size fits all. So maybe Harvey, it could, maybe this a hat I should have gotten for you.
You
know?
should have.
Right? But it didn't fit me. What do you mean one size fits all? One size doesn't fit all. We need to dispel from our minds and from our marketing plans this idea that one size fits all. One size definitely does not fit all. Look at the products that we see on the market. Do they have just one item? Take any product. Think about a variety of different products that you use. Is it just one item? Remember we talked about the Model T Ford? We said that was brilliant from a manufacturing standpoint. Of course, if you make one model in one color, that's got to be really simplistic, right? That's going to simplify your manufacturing operations significantly. But not everybody wants a black car. Some people want a white car. Some want red, yellow, orange, green. And some want small cars, some want big cars. And that's how you're going to get people to adopt the product. The more customized the product is. And some companies have gone so far as mass customization, which is challenging, which is very challenging to achieve. But that says basically that you have a market segment of one. Not 10 million, not 50 million, but a segment of one. And that's who we're catering to. That's who we want to produce our product for, based on that customer's requirements. Price is very often a compelling way to segment the market. And we looked at the iPod, for example. You see how they're at different price points in the market. So at a certain point in the product's life cycle, sales are going to plateau unless we have an item, an MP3 player, that is going to meet the needs of the early majority and the late majority. So not everybody is willing to pay $400 for an MP3 player. And so over time, they introduced the Nano and the Shuffle, and those they sell at like $100 and even less than $100. Because some people want 60 gigabytes of storage, and some only need 1 gigabyte of storage. So it's up to us to understand the market requirements around the world. We have to do a country analysis. That's a requirement. The onus is on us. We have to take responsibility for that. And the better job we do at the country analysis, the more successful that we're going to be. What are some of the differences and similarities that you could think of between given markets from a cultural perspective? Where do you think, based on your perspective, there are similarities that you observed from market to market, and where you feel there's differences? So based on your personal experience or what you've read, what do you think? As a global marketer, and we're thinking about where we're going to sell our goods and services, what are some of the trends that you've observed? Where do you think there's similarities, and where do you think there's differences?
Cultural? You give an example. Or you give an example first.
Give me. You're asking me questions? I'm asking you questions. I want you guys to think.
You say it again? Say it again.
All right, for the 14th time, the question is, where do we see, where have we observed, in your experience, that there's similarities amongst given markets and where there's differences? As we think about the desire to sell our goods and services, throughout the world, we need to understand where there's some commonality. Because in some cases there is commonality, and we could leverage that as we develop our marketing plan and our integrated marketing communications. And in other cases we need to recognize that, wait a minute, there's differences here, we're gonna have to change. So tell us, share with us, what do you think, Reuben? What are some of the things that you've observed around the world or read about different markets from any perspective where you think there's differences and also where there might be some similarities?
There's obviously a difference between the countries that they promote individuals versus countries that are very much, that's more of a communistic approach.
Absolutely. So there are some markets that support individuals, and there's others that promote this idea of collectivism. Absolutely. So we need to be sensitive to that. We need to adapt to that, our approach. That's going to be a big part of how we modify our messaging. So if the individuals in that society have internalized that, right, not just us evaluating and say, attach these labels, but the citizens there view themselves as part of a collective, and that's meaningful to them, and presumably we would have to determine if it's something that they view favorably, then we need to address that. That's absolutely going to define our messaging. In fact, there's any number of commercials that we could look at that focus on the individual, that are talking about how you should be yourself, be unique, distinguish yourself from your peers, and all these things. There's so many different products and categories. And in some markets, that's going to go over really well. And other markets, they're like, well, I'm part of the team. We're just, we should be more similar than different. So absolutely, that's a definitely important takeaway. Anybody else?
An example may be that when it comes to cleaning products, a lot of different cultures in a lot of different countries all want to focus on purity and cleanliness and that kind of aspect. But that purity and cleanliness may mean different things, different cultures, and the way to portray it may mean different things to different cultures.
Right, absolutely. Right. So we talked about that. The idea, there was a commercial that had in the background that it was raining, and we said that, well, in some cultures that was perceived as being pure, clean, fresh, and in other markets,
Fertility or something.
yeah, exactly. And in other markets, it was perceived entirely different. So this is a real challenge for us. It's not so easy as saying, I want to sell my products in the Middle East. I want to sell my products in China. I want to sell my products in Greece. It's very challenging if we're going to be successful. If we're going to do it right, it takes a lot of time to effectively develop a plan that's going to be able to generate a significant amount of sales and profit, and for us to be able to capture a significant amount of market share. Anything else? So let's talk about, let's go over the questions from the quiz. All right, the first question says, in chapter 18, which talks about pricing, it says, firms unfamiliar with overseas marketing and firms producing industrial goods orient their pricing solely on, what's the best answer there? The best answer is C, a cost basis. That's talked about on page 526. What do you think about this idea of cost plus pricing? Do you think it's going to enable us to be successful internationally? So what this question says is that we know what our costs are, which that's not something that you should take for granted. Remember, we talked about manufacturing costs and non-manufacturing costs, cost of goods sold and selling general and administrative costs. It's challenging to accurately define and allocate costs to produce a given good. But let's say we were able to do that. And so this says that whatever it costs us, we add a certain amount to that or a certain percentage. So now what's the problem? What's the problem in doing that if we hope to be successful in selling our product in Greece and Turkey? What are we missing there? Why do you think that we're going to not be able to maximize the amount of sales that we achieve? It's not based on market demand. We're just basing the price on what it costs us. Well, maybe we don't have an efficient operation. Maybe our cost structure is too high. Maybe our administrative expenses are too high. Maybe the cost of the raw materials to make the product are too high. What we need to understand is, what is the customer willing to pay? What did we say the first day? The 5 key components of marketing, from 30,000 feet, if you will. Identify an unmet need, develop a concept, determine a price that the customer is willing to pay for orange juice in that market. Develop the product, gain distribution, and build awareness. So, I don't recommend cost plus pricing. If you sell 1 unit, at least you know you'll be profitable. But we don't want to just sell 1 unit, we want to sell 100 billion units. So we need to challenge ourselves. We need to understand what is the customer willing to pay and develop a product that can be successful in that particular market. See, sneezes at the truth.
Always.
Now that's different from the pricing of industrial goods. So we see why in consumer products, why cost plus pricing is not the best approach in global markets, because it ignores everything we just talked about. The cultural norms, traditions, customs, the level of per capita income, all these different things. And we just said, look, well, this is what it costs us, and we're entitled to a markup, and so that's what we're going to sell it for. But maybe they don't want an 80 gigabyte MP3 player for $400. Maybe they have no need for it, and also maybe they can't afford that. So then we need to design a product for that particular market that's going to be relevant to their lifestyle and also affordable. But it's different in industrial markets. Why for industrial goods is it different? What is the expectation that organizations in the value chain have? So in other words, when you sell when you're selling an industrial good, the purchaser understands that in order for you to stay in business, you need to earn a certain amount of margin. It's not a secret. Very often, it's not a secret how much it costs you to make the product. In consumer products, that's closely guarded information. But in industrial products, it's very often that they talk about cost plus pricing. So it costs you a certain amount to make, because when you think about, you guys know the difference between process costing and job costing? So job costing, for example, is in accounting when we need to cost out a job, we need to give somebody a price for a particular job. Well, if you're making, for example, a piece of equipment for a company, maybe you've never made that before, but you're good at tooling and you've made other types of equipment, how do you know how much it's going to cost? So they say whatever your cost is, they know that there's a certain amount of billable hours, how long it's going to take to make it, how many laborers you're going to have working on creating the product, the equipment rather. And then they say to that, you add 50%. Businesses understand that in order for you to be successful, that your partners have got to be successful. You can't put your suppliers out of business. You can't squeeze them. If you're a manufacturer and marketer of laptops, for example, you can't squeeze the chip manufacturer. You'll put them out of business. Then what? Where are you going to get chips from? Where are you going to get processors? So you got to understand that your partners are entitled to also make a reasonable profit. And so cost is more transparent. And it's very common to talk about cost plus pricing. That whatever it costs, you add a certain amount of markup to that. And there's a variety of different costs. One of the things that consumers don't appreciate very often is all the costs associated with bringing a particular product to market. Very often they only think about the standard cost. They talk so much about, oh, the standard cost for a hoodie is $2. Well, no, they don't say the standard cost. They say, it costs $2 to make this hoodie. Well, of course it costs $2 to make the hoodie. And what about the sales organization? What about the marketing team? What about the $50 million that you spent on advertising? What about all the selling, general, administrative, other costs that you have? So why should you be surprised that the standard cost is $2 for a sweatshirt and that they sell it for $75? Well, the retailer also has to make margin. And you have these other expenses. You have a headquarters, and you have to pay the accountants, and all of that, those costs are not, they don't get swept under the rug. All of those costs have got to be taken into account. We have certain fixed costs that need to be allocated to the products. So you can see why with consumers, cost information is a sensitive subject. All right, the next question says that a certain type of pricing is a practical approach to pricing when a company has high fixed costs and unused production capacity. Very interesting. So the answer there is marginal cost. Marginal cost. So in other words, what does it cost the company to make one more unit? So if you have a significant amount of unused capacity, then you're thinking about how you're going to be profitable. How are you going to spread these fixed costs across as many units as possible? And so what you need to understand is, what is the incremental variable cost? So how much more plastic do we need to make one more unit? So marginal cost in that setting is often used. So we're just looking at the variable cost at that point. Because we realize that if we make 100,000 more units, that we could spread the fixed cost over those additional 100,000 units. That means that total fixed cost is going to stay the same, but didn't we say last time that the unit fixed cost is going to go down as the number of units produced is going to increase? So remember we talked about dumping. Dumping is illegal, and what happens is companies want to sell a product in a particular market at a very low price. So they have a significant amount of unused capacity, so what do? They make 10 million units and they want to ship it somewhere and sell it as long as they could cover their variable costs. So if it's not burdened with fixed costs, then the product actually is going to be rather inexpensive in that market, certainly relative to the competition. And so the reason they do that is because they realize if we sell, even if it's just enough to cover our variable costs, but we could sell another 10 million units, we're not going to be profitable. It's not going to cover our fixed costs and our variable costs. It's just going to cover our variable costs. Then we're going to have 10 million more units across which we could spread our fixed costs. That's the problem. One of the biggest problems in manufacturing, the issue that has a stranglehold on manufacturers is when they have overcapacity. And that's what's plagued the automotive industry in the US for so many years. Why? Because they had an enormous amount of capacity to produce millions and millions of units when they were the market share leader. And then once they lost a significant amount of share, and when I say lost, I mean like they lost like half their business went away to companies like Toyota, for example. Their fixed cost didn't change. Their total fixed cost was still the same. And that made it very difficult for the companies, for the big three automotive manufacturers in the United States to be profitable. And that's why over time what they did was they acquired other car manufacturers, because that would enable them to consolidate their manufacturing operations and spread those fixed costs over more units. The next question says, if a company has as its objective to reach a market segment that is relatively price insensitive or inelastic, thus willing to pay a premium price for the value received, it is most likely they will use a pricing strategy called what? What is a pricing strategy? If you know that the customers are not price sensitive. Right, skimming would be an appropriate pricing strategy. That means you could introduce the product at a high price and it's not going to have much impact on demand. So in other words, there's a lot of people who are willing to pay a high price. If we lower the price actually, maybe we wouldn't even see much of a increase in demand at all if the market is truly inelastic. The next question talks about Johnson & Johnson in Russia. It says Johnson & Johnson is the maker of a shower gel, a 2-in-1 shower gel that is to be considered a cosmetic and burdened with a 20% tariff. Johnson & Johnson would like it to be considered a soap substitute, which is only subject to a 15% tariff. This points out which of the following strategies that companies generally prefer in foreign markets with respect to tariffs.
B.
Right, B is the best answer. Ask for reclassification of the product to a lower customs classification. That's talked about on 534 in the book. All right, let's talk about duties. What type of duty to be invoked must be shown that the prices are lower in the importing country than in the exporting country, and that the producers in the importing country are being directly harmed by the dumping.
Stretching.
That's quite a stretch.
I think he was laughing.
Same sentence.
Come on.
Countervailing.
It's funny.
Countervailing duties. So countervailing duties to be invoked, in order for countervailing duties to be invoked, it must be shown that the prices are lower in the importing country than in the exporting country. So isn't that what we were just talking about? Is this issue of dumping? And so this is one of those things where they say, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. Domestic markets, they're not okay with companies, with multinational companies destroying a domestic business. Which of the following would be considered to be an advantage of leasing rather than owning? So when you think about operating overseas, what do you think would be an advantage of leasing rather than owning? Yes, C. C is the best answer on page 539. Leasing helps guarantee better maintenance and service on overseas equipment. When Pepsi first began to market Pepsi Cola in Russia, it was asked to accept an equal amount of Russian vodka. What do you think about this? An equal amount of Russian vodka is payment in return for permission to sell Pepsi Cola. The formal name for this trading strategy is called?
Counter-trade.
Yes, D, counter trade. Final answer. 8. U.S. domestic trade. In the U.S. domestic trade, the typical payment procedure for established customers is an open account. The best answer is A. That's on page 544. The next question asks, once the seller has accepted the credit, the buyer cannot alter it in any way without permission of the seller. The best answer is what?
E.
Which one? The best answer is B, irrevocable letter of credit on page 545. Why is the letter of credit so important as we think about being successful as global marketers? Why? What is it about the letter of credit? What does that enable us to do? How does that work?
Just collect the money from the person who bought, from the buyer.
Say it again?
Let us collect the money from the buyer.
It does what?
Let us collect the money from the buyer.
It helps facilitate that, but how? Who could tell us how? How does that work? How does that enable us to collect the money from the purchaser? A letter of credit involves three parties: the buyer, the seller, and a financial institution. So once you have issue a letter of credit in the name of a particular company, then what happens is the bank is now holding the money. All right? Financial institution. Let's say the bank, like HSBC, for example. So HSBC has the $10 million. The letter of credit says that HSBC is going to pay our company the $10 million when they receive proof that the product has been received by the purchaser. So once we ship the product there, then the documentation is going to be processed, the bill of lading is going to be processed, and when the bank has the proof, then they're going to release the money. Then we don't need to chase down people for the money. Now think about in the US, how challenging that is to get people to pay their bills. Imagine you sell products to a company in Vietnam and you ship them $10 million worth of merchandise. And then they say, I would gladly pay you tomorrow for $10 million worth of merchandise today. And then another day goes by, a week, a month, and you kind of get this feeling, I don't know, maybe we should have not given them 210 net 30, but what's our recourse? So the best thing for us to have done is to have the letter of credit, which says the bank has the money. The bank says, we have the money here, and we will distribute the funds. Once the merchandise is received, we will distribute the funds. So it's really an enabler, a substantial enabler for international trade. Questions about that? The next question says, a company has an ongoing relationship with a bank that routinely buys its short-term account receivables at a discount. What is that? What are we talking about there? Very important concept. So companies sell their accounts receivables. Somebody owes the company money. Well, we could sell that. We have somebody has an obligation to pay us money, so an organization will be willing to purchase our accounts receivables. So what does that mean? Let's say we have $10 million in accounts receivables that we want to sell. So how much are we going to sell it for? How much?
$1 million, $2 million.
Well, that would send me all you got. That's very generous of you. Usually it's between 2 and 5%. So on a transaction that size, how much would that be? So basically, we would sell them the $10 million in accounts receivables for $9,500,000, and when they collect it, they collect the entire $10 million. What's the advantage to us? Is today we get $9,500,000. That's known as factoring. Companies don't have an unlimited amount of working capital. They don't have an unlimited amount of cash. So when people owe the company money, we could factor those accounts receivables. A good example of where that happens every day is every time you use your credit card. Why is that? Because if you have let's say a Citibank MasterCard, and you use that to shop at Duane Reade, so if you shop at Duane & Reade with your Citibank MasterCard, who pays Duane Reade? You or Citibank? Citibank pays on your behalf. They get the money. Duane Reade gets the money. Then Citibank collects from us. That's factoring. That's an example of factoring. Practical example that happens all the time, but on a small scale. So we decide finally that we're going to buy a large, flat panel, high definition, 1080 Pi LCD 3D monitor for $6,500. We go into Best Buy and we give them our Chase Visa card. Chase pays Best Buy the $6,500, and they could get a fee for doing that. So actually, how much do they get paid? Not $6,500. They get paid something less than $6,500, like 3% less. So Best Buy gets 3% less, and the full $6,500 Chase collects from us.